everyone's audio and microphone are all set. So Tracy Murphy, Chair. Anne?
Anne Sigsby here.
Joan?
Here.
Sharon?
Here.
Kyle?
Here.
Morgan?
Here.
Carol?
Here.
Meth?
Here.
And Rob Cunningham from OSC is joining us. So the first item on the agenda is to hear from Rob. We talked a few weeks ago about some potential collaboration between the two committees. And I think everyone else on the committee is going to be really interested to hear your ideas. So I'll give you the floor.
Thank you very much, Tracy. And thanks for allowing me to join you today. The short of it is that the Open Space Committee is going to have an open slot as of June 30th. We've had a wonderful member who is going to retire at the end of her 3-year term, and she's done a great job for us. But we then will have a vacancy, so we're hoping to fill that. Now, I wanted to speak directly to the Recreation Advisory Committee because I think the Open Space Committee has operated for the last 2 years somewhat in a stovepipe. In fact, I was told early on that when one submitted an application for open space, you shouldn't call it an open space recreation proposal, even though it may have been. I scratched my head at that, but I've followed the guidance. But now it's clear to me after 2 years, I've learned a little bit that we really need to cooperate with whatever group can really enrich the open space experience for the people of the town of Orleans. And if there's any one committee that can do that really well, it's a Recreation Advisory Committee. So I wanted to come to you first with a recruitment message. I would love to have someone with direct open space, direct Recreation Advisory Committee experience apply for that 5th slot in the Open Space Committee. So if any of you or perhaps previous Recreation Advisory Committee members are interested, I really would encourage you to apply. We meet once a month. It's not overly taxing, but we've done good work over the past 2 years. And I think we want to do more good work with much wider input from other folks in town, which really is the reason we are reaching out directly to the Recreation Advisory Committee. So I'm hoping that someone from the committee or someone you know who has previous experience in recreation or open space or conservation might apply. So there are a few ideas that come to mind. The first is so obvious that I perhaps should pass over it, and that is that we want to do more to get more people out on our trails in town. Open Space Committee has always been just specifically have some trails, let people understand where they are, and that's about it. I think we want to go well beyond that. I think one example that you folks have come up with is a wonderful storybook trail, which I think is one of many ways that we could enrich the experience for people in town. There's a natural tension between folks in town who feel that conservation means leave what's wild, and not encourage the participation of people in town. I'm in the middle ground where I want to leave our habitat in as much of its natural state as we can do, but at the same time, make sure that people get out in the environment. If there's anything the pandemic has really proven to us, it's that people really want to be out in nature, and we want to improve that experience. So I don't have a whole lot of ideas for you today, and specifically how the Recreation Advisory Committee and open space can work together, but I think there must be lots of them. I've always wanted, for example, to have some sort of tag team kayak event that might connect, for example, or we have a whole series of landings that could get involved. Meeting House, Henson's Cove is not a landing yet, but Frostfish, Lonnie's, Barry's Pond. Wouldn't it be wonderful to have family tag team kayak events that somehow connect 2 or 3 or more of these ponds in an active recreation, maybe a timed event, maybe an event for kids and older groups at the same time. So I think that's one important aspect. Another where I know we can really use some cooperation and collaboration is in signage, letting people know where the open spaces are, and then what they will discover when they visit that open space, how hard the trail might be, how easy it is, the kind of flora and fauna they may encounter on that trail. So signage, I think, is really lacking right now. I've been heavily involved in in the Peck Conservation Area, and when one drives into that parking lot, one gets a barrage of signs. You know, walk at your own risk. Watch out for ticks, and it simply isn't friendly enough. It isn't inviting. So signage, finding ways to really engage with the schools and have them become active members. So all that, I think, is the kind of activity that I want to engage in, and I need the help of people with lots of recreation advisory experience, as well as younger participants who are much better connected to the school system. So all stakeholders are important in the process. I think we have a lot of more mature people who are active hikers on our trails, but I want to get the whole community. It's really disappointing to go to town meeting and find sometimes that the most important opposition may come from people involved in the schools. I want them on the other side of that activity. So that's all I have. I'd love to have someone join us. Joan?
I'm not volunteering to join you, but I have a question or two. How do your pieces of property align with OCT and with the conservation? Because Carol actually has been working on signage, and we got to put in for CPA funding, and that is going to the conservation land. So can you just explain that, Robert? Like the town conservation lands versus open space lands, are they one and the same? Are they different? And how do you overlap with those OCT properties, which we're also working with?
Yes, we work very closely with the Organized Conservation Trust. OCT is a private nonprofit organization. They can't raise direct funds from the state for their projects. They really have to rely primarily on public philanthropy, on private philanthropy. The Open Space Committee is a statutory body in the town of Orleans, and as a statutory body in the town, we can apply directly for state funds to try to support projects. What I've found over the last 2 years is that it's absolutely a terrific idea to collaborate with OCT in every aspect. And in fact, PEC is probably the end of working alone. That the Port Animicut project is the gateway, the Greenbelt Gateway is on the agenda for town meeting in Article 16. And that really is a joint public-private partnership between OCT and the Open Space Committee. We have some land at Port Animicut, and the Orleans Conservation Trust has other land. And the Greenbelt Gateway is going to stitch those lands together. So OCT is private philanthropy. I think of Open Space Committee working through the Community Preservation Act. It's really the mirror version of private philanthropy. It's philanthropy as a matter of public policy. Public philanthropy.
Carol?
Hi, Robert. Carol Coonholm. Thank you for coming. I guess a more direct question might be, once you acquire the property using CPC funds, do you literally turn it over to the Conservation Commission to be managed? I know some properties have a management plan. They have to be big enough to warrant that. And the Conservation Commission seems to be, working with Janelle, of course, seems to be the group that develops that management plan. Is open space part of that process?
Yes. And we turn the process over. Peck is a good example. I was alerted by George Meservey that the Peck sisters wanted to sell one of their lots. And so the Open Space Committee's mission is to identify and then attempt to acquire a property. So we did that. We didn't like the property that was being offered by the Pecks because it would have been split away from the other two lots that they have already sold to the town in 2005. So we put in the application, town meeting approved the Open Space Committee application for Peck, and town money through the CPA, the Community Preservation Act, is going to pay for that over the 20 years through bonding. So Open Space Committee's agency is really its ability to use community preservation money funds. Okay. What happens now is the Conservation Commission will be the managing entity for the Peck property. It'll be an expanded conservation area with the other two lots already acquired. But using CPA money, we must have a conservation restriction assigned to another independent group. And so in the case of Peck, the conservation restriction has been awarded to Orleans Conservation Trust. And in fact, it's just been recorded with the state in the recorder's office, so that the conservation restriction is now held by Orleans Conservation Trust, and they become the supervisor, the monitor of what's happening. They assure that the town of Orleans doesn't in some way violate the conservation restrictions. That has happened to other towns where a town might say, okay, we want to use part of a lot that was purchased with CPA money and help the golf course out. Well, you can't do that. Or you can do it only with extraordinary effort, usually with the opposition of whoever holds the conservation restriction. So there are some cases where the Conservation Commission manages the land and the CR is granted to Orleans Conservation Trust. In a couple of cases, one that's coming up, and I think will be the way we work this one, on the Greenbelt Gateway. No, it'll be the same as Peck, that we will hopefully be allowed to purchase the Greenbelt Gateway, the small property, and then we will assign a conservation restriction, award a conservation restriction to the Orleans Conservation Trust. In other cases, they own the land and they've given the Conservation Commission a conservation restriction.
Meth, and then Ann.
Can I just add a couple of points to that? If CPC money is used to purchase an open space property, the state regulations require that the local conservation commission take the management responsibility for it, and which is by and large fine. However, there is a somewhat of a conflict a little bit if in using that property, it's activity that the CONSCOM doesn't approve of, and that's a recreation kind of, let's say, kayak racks or whatever that happen to go in there. You have that potential disagreement as to how it's going to get used. So the only alternative to that is to make the open space purchase with regular town money. And so that would be then a purchase that would affect the tax rate in town. So there are freedoms that you get if you use the regular budgetary money out of the town, but I can't imagine really much of a meaningful open space purchase happening without going through the CPC, just for financial reasons.
Jeff, I'm glad you raised that. And yes, there's a large quotation around passive recreation. Passive recreation is encouraged on CPA funded land. Active recreation is not encouraged. So there's a fine line where one goes from passive recreation, which generally means hiking, birding, things along those lines, to something, let me see, an overland motorcycle run would not be possible. And yes, the kayak racks are somewhere in between, or maybe not in between. I'll back up to MEF there, because that certainly is an issue that's going to increasingly come up.
I think they're fine. I know they're fine. It's just more or less the CONSCOM has a really hard time allowing any disturbance in their jurisdiction at all. So going and digging holes for a kayak rack just gives them agita.
Anne?
I want to thank you, Robert. I'm going to say I'm not in a position to join your group at this time, but I think it is a wonderful concept to incorporate the Recreation Advisory Committee energy. And I also see that from all corners of town, surfacing exactly what you've said. You used the phrase stovepipe. I think Andrea Reed and others use silos. That we collaborate is where we get our strength. And I would go so far as to say this committee, Recreation Advisory Committee, has shown itself, especially this past year, as the hub of collaboration. And so you come to the right place, even if we don't give you a person, we give you strong encouragement to follow through on some of those wonderful ideas. I will tell you, some of us, when we were making the rounds for our Orleans Outdoors 7 different activities. Conservation was an important group to go to. And John Janelle said something wonderful, and I'm reminded of it today. He turned to his commissioners and said, you as commissioners, yes, you spend a lot of time with regulation, but remember, you are also landlords. And you are being brought some wonderful ideas for uses of the property that you oversee. And it was a wonderful moment where people really were supportive. And by the way, kayak racks, for all to know, is something welcomed by the Conservation Commission because they will have a say in the orientation, which matters, the precise placement, which matters, but the concept and the very gentle passive use of the waterways with kayaks and the ability of kayak racks to protect the shoreline is perfectly consistent with their passive goals. So we have collaborated hugely, which is how those community preservation projects look like they may well be all going forward. And one way or another, I love your tag team idea. One way or another, there's a will on both sides, so there will be a way.
Terrific. I appreciate that comment, and I'm glad to hear that there seems to be a more favorable perspective on kayak racks. Because yes, indeed, it's one's using the place on land, but then getting out and engaging in passive recreation on the water. I don't want
Carol?
to use all your time. You've got other things to discuss, but Carol, please.
I just wanted to bring you up to speed a little bit more on what Joan already mentioned, and that is the funding that we are going to receive from the CPC for trail signage improvement. And if you know a lot about that already, please stop me and I won't waste your time. But there are some next steps that would be a logical place for someone from your committee to collaborate with us, and they're very imminent. Would you like me to go on and explain those?
If your committee chair has the time for it, I'd love to hear it.
I'll be quick, Tracy. Okay, Tracy?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I was still muted, but
Okay, conservation, particularly Mike Brink, put in a request for signage like you're referring to at the Peck property, the old Peck property, and replacing that with signage when you get to the conservation property that is consistent, that's consistent with this, with the signage efforts that are underway and guidance that will come out of that at the planning board level and with the Cape Cod Commission, that study ongoing. We also proposed as part of this Orleans Outside 7 project package. We also proposed signage once you were inside that welcome sign from and the name of it, which would be interpretive signage as simple as a map, maybe with the species that are present, certainly with the trails shown, and maybe even a series of signs depending. And we propose to do the first sign, just one sign as the first step, so we could understand the process that we would take with all the others. So I would invite you, if you want somebody to be part of those initial meetings, it'll be a collaboration of some 1 or 2 from recreation, some 1 or 2 from conservation, touching base with Janelle and Nate if waters are involved, and historic commission people or OHO people. It just depends on which one we choose, but we have money in for multiple signs, and the process will be a team, a multi-siloed team coming together and working on one sign to see what we learn about how that works. And then we will tackle 2 or 3 or 4 more with the money that we've been awarded. So that's the short.
That will be terrific. And by the way, I congratulate you on having the 7 projects in the CPC article this year. So I think that's just fabulous and is a testament to your energy.
Great.
One group you didn't mention in the collaboration was the Orleans Conservation Trust. And I believe OCT has done a much better job than the town in informing people when they arrive at a site, what they're going to see, in some cases, how long the trail might be. No one has thought about trail difficulty. you get that when you when you go to Lindblad and look for easy trails or hard trails. But we should have stuff like that as well. There are places simply on the Peck property that are difficult for senior citizens, easy for kids, but not so easy for seniors. But we have to think of all age groups, don't we? But the Orleans Conservation Trust make sure you take a good look at their signs. So I think they do a reasonably good job, but we can all do better.
Really good point. And we will be, as part of this one sign pilot project, we will be updating the signs, updating the maps that exist in the current town brochure, which is both an OCT trail and a Conservation Commission owned, managed land combination of walking trails in Orleans. And there are thousands of them left, so I don't think they want to reprint immediately, but we're going to, the software and the files reside on the OCT website, so we will be partnering with them to update those trail maps before we actually know where we would put a sign and then construct, the sign.
Yeah, there's actually that other small step. I'm always, I was shocked once to see how beautiful the OCT Conservation Commission cooperation was on the original Orleans Trail Guide. I was not happy to find that it was not generally continuously available in a lot of the places where you would want that trail map distributed, including all real estate offices, so that when people come to town new, someone can hand them that trail guide and they can be on their way. So yeah, I think everything about trail information, when you're there, what you see on the trail guide, those are all really important, and we'd love to work with you closely on that.
We will be in touch.
Okay.
Yeah.
We've
Any other
monopolized.
questions or thoughts? Okay, as I mentioned to Rob, it would be wonderful if there's a committee member interested in this seat, and if not, we can just see about scheduling some, a committee member to attend a meeting, or vice versa when a project comes up. Morgan? Yes,
we do that by definition with the Orleans Conservation Trust. Stephen
Okay.
O'Grady has been invited to as an active participant in every one of our open space committee meetings, and that's really helped enormously in cross fertilization. So if we can't get a permanent member with experience from the Recreation Advisory Committee, it would be fantastic to have a standard participant in our meetings. So
Morgan?
I'd be happy to go to a few meetings to start off. I don't think I have the time to commit to being on another committee, but I also work in the Nauset School District and would be happy to ask around if you're looking for somebody who has an interest in being outside, maybe a science teacher. I'm thinking of somebody at OES right now that I walk with daily that might have the time. I could reach out to her. I could, if you'd like me to put some feelers out for some teachers with families that live in Orleans, I'd be happy to do that. I can think of a few that might volunteer to do that.
a great idea, and I appreciate the initiative. So I look forward to hearing from you.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate the time together, and it was great to hear from you.
Well, my pleasure entirely, and thank you very much for inviting me.
Okay.
So I'm going to leave now, and I hope you have time to conduct the business you really want to conduct.
We'll be in touch
in addition
soon.
to this.
Okay. Good night.
Bye,
Good
Rob.
night.
Good night, Rob.
Thanks, Rob.
Okay. So the next item on the agenda is minutes for the April 15th meeting. I'll look for a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Okay,
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All right, then Tracy Murphy, aye. Joan,
Aye.
Anne,
Aye.
Sharon,
Aye.
and Kyle.
Aye.
Terrific. Okay, Alan is not feeling well today, so he's not able to attend the meeting. I heard from him this morning, so I sent him some questions. He asked me to send questions, so I did. I also sent them to Tom Daly and asked if he could attend the meeting, but he was not able to attend the meeting either. Tom Daly did call and say that he doesn't know the answers to the questions because they're rec details. So I am going to share my questions with you, and then if you have additional questions, I will add them to the list, and then hopefully we can, get some answers at some point. So when I wrote to Alan, I gave him most of the questions that I was planning on asking this evening. I asked for a follow-up on the pickleball instructor. I did, after last month's meeting, send Alan, I think, 3 names of pickleball instructors on the Lower and Outer Cape. Tennis lessons this summer are down to 3 weeks. Last year, it was 6 or 7 weeks. Oh, Morgan, do you know?
No, I just had a question. Do you know if they're doing the adult tennis in between? They used to do kid tennis 3 days a week. So I'm just adding a question. Are the grown-ups going to be back Tuesday, Thursdays? And will children be Monday, Wednesday, Fridays again? Because of COVID, the adults didn't have tennis last summer, and I'm eager to get back. It's a selfish question.
Most of the questions that I asked Alan today were not new today. So I've asked him for a few weeks. I haven't heard answers from him, and I didn't hear answers today, and there haven't been any changes to the website. So I think it's safe to assume that the answer is no, that right now there are 3 weeks scheduled for kids in grades 5 through 8. That is a reduction both in terms of how many sessions are available, and also in terms of age groups, that there was adult and there was also tennis for younger kids before. Sharon, did you have information on that?
Just that I know that a few people who are taking the adult tennis right now have asked a couple of weeks ago if it could be continued this summer. And I know that the person who's coaching, the instructor, says that he could do it. So it's just a matter of available court time, I think. I also know that Alan was asked about 2 weeks ago about the age groupings having to do with 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th, and not including the rising 8th graders. So those questions have been put out to him several weeks ago, and there hasn't been a response.
And I don't know if, if you got to look at the grid, it was on the website, but it wasn't distributed, but all the tennis lessons have waiting lists already for the kids. And so the question also is, why can't we add more tennis lessons? Because there is a waiting list.
Thank you. There's another thing that came up over the past week or so is that Brewster and Sandwich have calendars on their MyRec websites with clickable links to sign up for activities and to kind of see at a glance, and you can search by ages or availability or all sorts of things. Orleans has a calendar on its MyRec page, but it's blank. Alan did get back to me at the last meeting. We wondered if, not knowing yet about the calendar, we wondered if he could put some sort of calendar or list of activities on the news page. He said he could not. The list goes on. There was a mistake on the summer recreation fees, so that for swim lessons, residents were charged $25 and non-residents were charged $25. The town meeting, the vote was that residents be charged $45. Sharon caught that earlier this week and it was fixed, but I think we're like a $500 or $600 loss based on the number of non-residents who already signed up at a steep discount. So there's that. I asked Alan about intergenerational activities. He told me that I could get them running and he'd hire someone later in the summer to do something like the zucchini boat races, but he went on to say that we should not be involved in day-to-day operations and that any intergenerational activity should be at the discretion of Judy and Alan. And then my last thing, poor Alan, is that mid-March, Tom Daly said that Alan was working on a volunteer handbook, a summer recreation handbook, and a sexual harassment handbook for his employees. And I asked about the progress on those. So, and I asked if surveys were ready because we talked about doing surveys. So again, hopefully we hear back from Alan soon. It's disappointing because summer is upon us. And there are a lot of unanswered questions. Anne?
I propose that the questions related to our requests and needs from the Recreation Department go to the Recreation staff, which includes the supervisors and the director. And it doesn't matter who answers or follows up or accomplishes the needs. We have a list of needs that we're communicating. The town of Orleans has requested a list of things and we're the conduit of requests. And I would also send our requests for fulfilling the needs to the select board, either by way of MEF or more formally.
If I could just answer that, the best way to do that is to copy any communications that you do to the select board, and the address would be, you send it to John Kelly for all the select board, and anything addressed that way will get to every member.
Okay. Thank you, Joan.
I think you have to add, and I hate to bring this up, but I need to, at the Charter Review Committee, when Alan spoke, he described the rec advisory team as a fifth wheel. And that was pretty unsettling. And I do think we need to have an honest understanding about it, because if he thinks we're a fifth wheel, that's the way he's treating us. And it's time to address it head on.
I didn't put that on.
Can we do a
the
vote of
email.
no confidence maybe and send it to the Board of Select? I mean, we're talking later on our agenda about a half part-time staff member. Why don't we just change that to we are recommending a complete changeover in the head of the department. I mean, we're not getting answers to any of the questions that we're asking. We're not seeing additional programming. We're busting our butts getting, rec advisory involved in the town and pushing the issue. It seems to me like I was all for, like, I don't want to get involved in this. I don't want to fight with Alan. I don't want to do this. But this is getting to the point where, what we're doing is being pushed aside and not listened to. And I'm kind of fed up with it. I think that what we are really asking the town for is somebody who's actually involved in wanting to build a better recreation department. And it's not just for young kids. It's not just for older people. It's for everybody. And this intergenerational thing, on one hand, he's telling us no volunteers. And the other hand, he's telling us, well, you could start it, Tracy, if you want to do intergenerational stuff, but, I'll hire it later. I think the conversation needs to be put to a point and, we try to get, some movement elsewhere. It's kind of really unfortunate to hear all this, but I mean, that to me, that fifth wheel comment is kind of the straw that broke my back.
Yeah, me too.
I think it's been an active few months of back and forth. And I would, I think that I think it's been a difficult relationship and it continues to be difficult. I guess, is there emotion in there, Kyle? I've never done this before.
I mean,
I'm
I-
still
I
getting
would-
used to approving minutes and.
So, I mean, I obviously wasn't expecting this as part of the conversation. It's always been brewing in the background, but it's, I certainly would make some, a motion. And I'm thinking on my feet here, but I feel I would move that the committee submit a vote of no confidence in the director of the recreation department, listing our grievances, namely in the form of lack of information and lack of substantial progress towards developing further programming. We have discussed, I think, a part-time position to help with that. And I feel that the committee is more on board with having a changeover in the head of the department to see someone who's truly interested in building a better recreation department for Orleans. I know that's a lengthy bit of a motion, but I think, the gist of what I'm trying to get across is that we have no confidence that the current director is working to better the Orleans Recreation Department and has no interest in working with the Recreation Advisory Committee. And that's, I think, what I want to, put in writing, get it in front of the select board, make it known. Sorry for the baby.
Is there a second? And then we can discuss.
I second Kyle's motion.
Okay, thank you, Sharon. And then discussion, Sharon, did you have?
Well,
You had
just
your
that I
hand up, so-
really, I agree with everything that Kyle is saying. I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, and every time that I go back to what Mr. Harrison's job description is, I really kind of get a pit in my stomach, because we're looking at the bare minimum of what should be happening. Really, we can't get budget questions, we can't get financial questions, we can't get metrics. Communication is spotty in terms of reaching out to the community. I asked a question, I think it was in April, about the summer program and how he was going to get that information out there. And that was just thrown back, that was how he did it. And there hasn't been any other community outreach other than the email that went to people who have previously signed up for summer programming. So if you've never signed up for something, you're not going to know what's happening. Certainly the mismanagement of the revolving fund in terms of charging the wrong fee for the non-residents that cost $540 in revenue. Nobody knew in that department about that was something that I caught. The list can go on and on of incidences and times where he's just either obstructed us or has no interest in what we have to say, including, sitting in front of the committee, the town, the
Charter review.
Yeah, the Charter Review Committee, and claiming how he has managed to keep the revolving fund and apply for all of these grants. That it's his recreation department that did these things. That was really what we did. It's time.
Other thoughts? Morgan?
I might be getting sidetracked a little bit. I agree with everything that's been said, and we'll back this motion. I have real concerns about the summer program getting off. I think by having this discussion right now, we might be shooting ourselves in the foot a little bit, and that now I'm worried that we won't have a summer program. So I'd love to get in touch with, maybe is Ivan, I don't know is John or Ivan involved? I mean, I think is there some way that we can reach out to the two of them to make sure that that we have a program to run? Because I think the kids are really counting on us. And I think the grownups can survive without a little bit of rec if that had to be. But I think there's a lot of families counting on us to run the program this summer, and we got to make that happen somehow.
I agree. I think one of the things that I've been struggling with is how much of the management of the recreation director this committee should be taking on. because there's been a lot of, following up on the revolving fund that, with Kyle's letter last year. There have been budget catches that Sharon has made. Joan did the metrics and the newsletter when Alan wouldn't do them, when Alan didn't submit this pickleball application last year. We didn't ask him for any help on those applications this year as a result. The feedback I have had in conversations with Alan's superiors has been supportive, but not active. And so I think that at some point, what I am feeling is that it can't continue to be the committee's responsibility to be documenting Alan's missteps and shortcomings. It has to fall back on the shoulders of his superiors, and that this might be a challenge. That the summer program is important to preserve, critically important, but that's not our challenge. That's, that we're saying that this is a problem that needs to be dealt with, and it's not our job to fix it.
You're right, Tracy. Good point.
Joan and then Meth.
Well, and I've told Tracy this idea, and it might be crazy, but if we're being considered a fifth wheel and really not being part of what Alan does, do we consider not having a rec advisory committee and being a standalone nonprofit like what Kyle does for the skateboard park, and be residents for a recreation of Orleans? Because then we could work with who we want, then we could put things forward, because and I gave a lot of effort into trying to fix what I could and came in really trying to be a partner. But, it's just not working anymore. Batting your head against the wall and doing Excels and thinking you can get a response, and you get nowhere. So, but yet when we met with Judy Wilson from the Senior Center, it was like eye-opening. It was like she was so enthused about what we could do and how we can go forward, and Robert and Steve O'Grady and so many other people in town. So why don't we just focus on what we can do if we can't change what's going on in the rec department?
I've got a nonprofit for you. I got one. Yeah, we can do it through that. Not that I'm pushing that. I don't know whatever, but like, I love this committee and the enthusiasm, and it's really, I get it. It's very frustrating for what we're coming up against, trying to build a better rec. And that's the basis of the motion, right? The motion is to express our concern, and it's not to get somebody fired. It's not to, be in the management position of the recreation department. It's to say, this is what we're looking for, and it's not being met. Somebody's got to do something, but it's not us. We're not supposed to be doing that.
Right.
I want to get Meth and Ann in here because they had hands up.
You mute, Meth.
Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, I'm not sure where to begin, but I will say that right now, this information gets to the select board only because of you. There's no other channel for this. There's no other information coming to us that covers anything from that list that you have just been talking about. So you're really doing an important thing, and I think that it may be frustrating, but I would really compliment you on having, I think, accomplished a fair amount, and probably it was 10 times harder than it should have been, but it's still progress in my mind. So I can't remember the date that you're coming to meet with the select board. Is that June 9th?
The 9th, yeah.
Okay. That's really, I think, the place where all this should get out on the table. And as much of this information that can be given to the select board ahead of time, the better. And I think a vote of no confidence is probably the wrong term to use. I think it's basically just saying that these are all the things that we've been trying to accomplish, and we just can't get any help and get any progress with doing the things that I think, not just you, but the select board and other people in town all want to do with the recreation program. And so the question for the select board is, help us out. What do we, what can you do to help?
Anne and then Kyle.
So I think a vote from this committee is a valuable tool because it is part of the information that we convey to the select board. I think sort of spinning off from what Rob Cunningham said about when we're traveling, we call them the no signs, no dogs, no this, no that. Well, rather than no, our motion might be that the committee is asking the town for a partner that we don't currently have. And we ask those folks who have the ability to change the landscape to hear what we need and why we need it. We just don't, it's very clear, it's been very clear to us, and we have chapter and verse, all of us, and we can list quite clearly what the chapter and verse of what's missing. But several of us have gone back to that May meeting in 2019 where this committee was created. And from that day forward, the select board has been very supportive of the concepts that our vision is a shared vision. We are a tool for the select board to know what's needed, and we've been appreciated, and we should speak up. And I do think a vote of some sort, maybe a revised wording, asking those people who are in charge, because we have told many people how we are spinning our wheels. We're asked to advise, and we find that it is the current recreation director is not interested in our advice, and we've been told that in words and action. But the select board is, and it is our advice to the select board to help us get a partner that we can work with.
Kyle and then Carol.
So on that point, Ann, I was raising my hand to potentially amend the motion. I do agree with Beth's kind of advice about the no confidence vote. I think that we probably haven't been as forthcoming or necessary upfront with the select board in public about some of our grievances and difficulties with the rec director and the program itself. But I would amend the motion to approve 2 or 3 members of our committee to author a letter detailing the steps that we've taken to improve the recreation department, whether it be the fees, the revolving account, the CPC applications, those things. The requests that we have made of the rec director for additional programming, and all the other requests, budget information, and the lack of responses that we've received. I think so that would be, I think, an appropriate motion based upon the discussion that we've had, and just kind of trying to detail this particular conversation and express our displeasure or frustration with trying to accomplish our charge. I was just looking at our charge, and I think that we've accomplished a lot, and this particular motion, I think, will help explain why we haven't accomplished more, and lay out a lot of things that are within our charge.
Carol.
I have not worked on a town committee like this before, but I've been in lots of not-for-profits, and I've managed lots of people in the business world over lots of years. And in those settings, what you would do is somehow use the wording of, please use this as input to his performance review. It's data that shows lack of performance, and they're just facts. It's not whether it's in his intention or whether he's interested. They're just facts that a request happened on this date, and by this date there had been no response, or the response was X. And especially in matrix organizations where you have many people you report to and many people you work with, that input for performance reviews goes to your manager, yes, but it comes from many, many people. And so I would say that's another possible way to frame it, as we have direct experience working with him, and this is data we have to offer.
Joan?
I just want to, what Carol said, I mean, I come from a very big corporate world, but we always had key performance indicators, which is jargon for you doing your job. And I mean, we still haven't heard back from Alan on if you ever contact Riley from the police department. We're trying to build bridges and we're having them broken. And I do want to add that in there on the list of things that we have tried to do that we couldn't move forward with. But I would like to know, are there any key performance indicators for anyone in the town? I mean, how are you judged? How are you measured? You know, how are your reviews given? Because, you know, I don't want to just put this on Alan, but if this is the way that the town operates, it's the way the town operates. You know, so Matt, maybe you know.
Well, just for a general background, all of this personnel management is specifically given to the town administrator. I mean that's the top of the food chain, with the exception of department heads. I mean, the selectmen do get involved with performance for the police and fire chiefs and the department heads. But everything that's being discussed here is clearly not the purview of the select board. And so the other thing that's in here that makes it, and it's the only time I've ever had to deal with it in my career, is unions. All these town employees are union employees, and it changes everything in how this gets dealt with. So that doesn't help, but that's just information.
In discussions I've had so far this year, the union issue has come up. My understanding is that documentation is an important part of that, and I think that the vote would force that these sorts of things be documented in a way that I'm not confident they're being documented right now. I don't think we've been as forthcoming with the select board. We've had limited time with this. The select board has been so supportive, but our face time has been limited, and we've wanted to be really strategic and sort of take the higher road in those meetings. I personally have been much more upfront with Tom Daly, and again, he's been very understanding, but I think that something has to happen. Today he talked to me about an email that Alan sent, and I had to ask which email, because I have several emails from Alan that are worthy of further discussion about what is going on here. So I think, to the degree that the vote just publicly clarifies that we all know what we all know, it's an important step. Morgan?
Well, I was just going to say that documentation piece. I agree with Carol. I agree with Joan. I work for the town of Eastham, and obviously I'm unionized, and I'm reviewed all the time. And there's probably a file for all the years that I've worked there. Every year I'm observed, and I'm given goal. I set goals every year, and I'm hoping the contracts are similar for other town employees. So I mean, that might be something that in our motion we say, I hope this is documented and put into, per whatever the union contract says, into this employee's file.
Mm-hmm. Anne?
In terms of documentation, yes, it may be a useful tool. In our charge, I think we can put in our revision of our charge that the Recreation Advisory Committee is uniquely positioned to provide performance review information. But the bigger picture is this. It's not our job. In fact, we're told, and so is the select board told, that personnel matters are not our job. But it is our job to say, town deciders, you who have the ability to make things happen, you need to have your feet held to the fire and make things happen, because this is very bad. We have given 2 years now, and this has been a theme, a current of frustration. We have stayed on the high road, and we are saying that in order to do a good job ourselves, we need the help of the select board and the town administration to make some changes. I'm not saying what the changes are. We just say, this is unacceptable. It's your job to fix it, and we'll tell you what's needed. It's a disservice to the town of Orleans to say that you care about recreation, families, intergenerational, senior center, collaboration with the police department, open space, and then handicap us very markedly. I mean, it's remarkable what we've been able to do in spite of. So I think that that's our message. We're not going to tell you how. Presumably, you know how. We just tell you that you need to pay attention and make things happen.
I will need some help because we had a motion, it was seconded, and then it was amended to a letter. Could we vote on that?
Vote on the amendment.
We vote on the, okay,
Did we get a second on the amendment?
we
We
didn't.
need one.
I think
I don't know.
the amendment,
I'm trying
it
to
wasn't
think.
really an amendment, was it, Kyle? It was like a second motion.
I mean, yeah, I guess, so to make it easy. how about
Thank you.
this? I'll withdraw my original motion
Okay,
and the amendment. I will move that the committee document our efforts to improve the recreation department, our efforts to collect information from the recreation department director, and further document our difficulties as expressed by this committee through emails to the rec director in this discussion. I'm not privy to all the details, but those 3 points. So the motion would be to submit to the Board of Select our efforts to improve the rec department, our efforts to collect information from the rec director, and our frustrations in our ability to work with the rec director.
okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second? I mean, I'll second. Okay. Any discussion on that? Okay, then we will go for a vote. Tracy Murphy, aye. Anne? Anne, did you vote and I missed it?
Oh, aye.
Okay, Joan,
Aye.
Sharon,
Aye.
Kyle,
Aye.
and Evan.
Aye. I've only got
Okay.
the aye.
Okay.
Hmm.
Okay. I'm happy to write a letter I mean, I've started a few, so I can go back and work with the ones that I've already started over the past few months. Is there anyone who we talked, one of the amendments included a few people. So is there anyone who would like to help with that letter? Okay, so Joan and Sharon. Okay.
Can I'm
Yes,
taking the
please.
minutes, and I'm not sure I got the the motion and I know I didn't get the details. Can you
So
just say your 3 points?
3 points were our efforts to improve the recreation department, our efforts to collect information from the rec director, and I think it was our frustrations in working with the rec director.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, that's the director's report for tonight. Moving on.
Tracy, can I ask a question? As a question for Meth. Meth, how do we find out what the union rules are and what the policies are? Is that accessible to anyone in the town?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, we do these negotiations with, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 different unions. And it's like, it's Greek to me. I mean, when you start going through all the processes, I mean, the town hires a special attorney really to handle all of that. And so I can't answer that question for you, I don't think.
I guess, so where could I find it? If I just wanted to look through, so this is what the union says you need to do for your job. And yes, you'd have a review every 6 months. This is what you have to sign off on. Like, is there anything that exists?
Well, first of all, there will be a job description
Right.
for everybody.
Right, but past that, the reviews, monthly, like, is there something you have to?
No, I think John Kelly could answer all these questions.
There's got to be language in there's a contract somewhere and it's public, because like if you were to say Union 54, the Nauset school teacher, you can pull up on Google our contract and read the whole thing if you want. You just have to know the name of what are they unionized under, what's the name of the group, what does he fall under, and I'm sure it's a public document. I just don't know the name of their group.
Right, that's what.
Yeah.
Okay, because we do have a job description. So we have that to start with, and then we can ask John Kelly for union rules. Okay, moving on then to other, the select board meeting came about, we've been talking for a while about revising our charge and going to the select board, and then another part of the charter review committee meeting was that Alan really described the new part-time position as someone who would be his assistant. And that was something that didn't ring true to the original conversations about that. And the select board agreed and put that job description process on pause until our committee could come together and discuss it and bring it to them. So that is good and an opportunity for us. Meth had suggested that the charge be step 1, that we look at what we want to do and then look at the position and what we'd like to see as elements of that new position that would help us do what we want to do. So I have been working on a charge revision, but I also put together elements to be considered in the charge change, just to sort of break it down into a couple of general ideas. I've never written a charge before, so I'm not clear on the best language, and so I thought this might be another way to go about it. So there are 3 main things that I saw coming out of our conversations. One was the idea of broadening recreation. All interests abilities and age groups, making it more inclusive and creative and collaborative. The second one was being more data driven, getting metrics regularly, looking at the revolving fund regularly. And the third was clarifying our role in relation to the recreation department, and reviewing the recreation department. So my understanding is that committees are not part of job reviews, or nor do they provide input on job reviews, but we can review the department, just not the personnel. So that was a way to tackle that. So I'll entertain thoughts or other ideas. The changes are in italics on the draft. Yes, Anne?
I know this might take longer than you were hoping, but I think you've done some wonderful work with the elements to consider. And I think it would be good to literally, read your point, let people say, yes, that stands, or can you modify it? I agree with your idea that proposing elements rather than literally coming up with the language precisely is a good way to go. But if we just as a group went through human nature also being that we may not really attend to them without, as a group, attending to them.
Okay, thank you. All right, so why don't I go through section by section, and then you can tell me, take out this or add this, or whatever you want to tell me. So the first one, RAC seeks to update its charge in order to reflect our intention to approach recreation with a broader approach. See, I'll take out one approach and I'll put in another word, than originally envisioned. We'd like our charge to reflect the desire for robust, inclusive, creative recreation for all interests, abilities, and age groups in town. So one part of that would be defining the committee's relationship to the new position, which I'm tentatively calling a community coordinator. The second part would be broader understanding of recreation, where the charge currently lists policies and programs, consider adding facilities and opportunities. Again, I've been trying to get at, how some of the CPC projects that like trails and that sort of thing fall under our purview. RAC's goal of greater collaboration with other committees, schools, neighboring towns, and RAC's intention to support the idea of a community center without walls, as well as the development of a year-round, far-reaching Orleans calendar. So anything to add or edits, Joan?
I think I can't remember her first name, her last name was Minkoff. What she had said, Maxine, what she had said at the charter review really hit me, that maybe it is even more than recreation. Is it recreation and enrichment? Is it art programs? Is it crafts? Just recreation is normally outdoors activities. So I would like to put some consideration into potentially adding the word enrichment in there.
Okay.
And the other couple of things I would put in there, it's greater collaboration with other town groups. Like we're already doing a nice job with, well, now open space, but with the conservation and with the library. So that, and then the other thing is the understanding of what is happening in the other towns is the school districts are losing kids. How do we really work beyond just through the rec director, but how do we pyramid it? I don't know how to explain that, but when we talk about losing our elementary population going down, and so's Chatham's, and how are you going to look at this community-wide, not just Orleans, but a broader view of it beyond Orleans somehow. And I think that's going to come to fruition pretty soon. So that makes sense.
Yeah, yep. I think that came up in the softball discussion with sort of, and I agree, I think it's going to continue to be an issue. Meth?
A phrase that I've heard, and so it's not mine, but I really like it, is just the expression community life. in some ways, I think the recreation's mission is community life. I mean, just all the things that the ways in which the community can be brought out to do different things, cultural, athletic, whatever. I mean, to me, that's a pretty big,
Yes.
it's a pretty big step, but this is a long range, it's a work that'll take a while.
Okay, thank you. That helps. Anne?
I love that community life because it
Yes.
does capture, and I think elucidating the arts enrichment are words that can fulfill the concept of community life. The last one, the community center without walls, I think is a good place to add with the ultimate goal of a bricks and mortar home.
Okay. Okay. Number 2, RAC seeks to be more data-driven. RAC will receive programming metrics each season to review with the recreation director. RAC will receive monthly updates on the revolving fund to review with the recreation director. Joan.
Okay, so data just unto itself isn't going to help us. We really need a systematic approach to how we're looking at programming. So it's either year over year or increases or decreases. So maybe what we really need is we need an analytical approach that if you look at the data, you can make decisions by. So it's decision-making analytics, not just a programming metrics. Because we'll get how many kids took the program and how many
Right.
didn't. What do you do from that? I also think it'd be good to understand what analytics the Council on Aging uses and how can we use the same type of analytics across all programming opportunities in the town of Orleans. So if Judy has a system she's using, maybe we should model the same sort of system. And so that's what I was saying. In other towns, how can we leverage what they already purchased through MyRec and learn what other towns are using and how they're using that system?
Okay. Anne?
I think Joan's comment is enormously helpful because the data doesn't stand alone. It's how it's used. And rather than in this, get into the nuts and bolts of whose analytic process, to include just a comment that the data can lead us, I think Evan used the phrase data-driven, evidence-based decision-making to accomplish our goals.
Carol?
Can I just ask that we put who's going to conduct those analytics into the phrase? Does that mean we do it or we expect that from the director?
We expect it from the director.
Okay, then I think we should say receive that from him, just as whatever other board does from Judy at COA and other folks.
Okay. And then the third, RAC seeks to clarify its role in relation to the recreation department. Oh, yes?
Tracy, this is Evan. Sorry, I'm driving and trying to be safe on the road here, but I tried to raise my hand. I'm not sure.
Oh, I'm sorry. I see it now.
Oh, okay.
Don't mean to make things harder than they already are.
No problem. So I really love bullet number 2. Definitely near and dear to my heart. Did you say something about exit survey feedback upon the conclusion of activities as well? If you didn't, I think that might be something to consider as well. So we're actually getting the written word feedback on how well or what constructive criticism participants have to make programs better to go along with the numbers of how many participants and how much revenue was raised. And that's all I wanted to add on point number 2.
Thank you. Yes, I have that in the draft of the charge, but not in the elements. So I'll make sure that it's in both. Yes, I agree. Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, anytime. Annually, the committee will review the recreation department in achieving the goals of collaboration with committees, schools, neighboring towns, meeting the needs of people of all ages, interests, and abilities, effective communication, long-range planning, volunteer coordination and recruiting, public survey, and responsiveness to community requests. So it's there too. Grant acquisition and special attention to the needs of teenagers and young families. I mean, we could go on and on and on, but I'll take a few more. Joan?
I think, I love all the stuff you have here. I think what's missing though is the whole thing about communication. I think it's like Sharon said, unless you got the email, like if your child was in the rec program last year, you didn't know about it. So we do need a communication strategy in here about all the programmings across all ages. So I don't know where that goes here.
So we have effective communication under one of the goals.
But this
You
is
want it somewhere.
You in achieving goals. I think you need a communication strategy.
So
maybe
a
like
fourth element all about communication, maybe that could include the calendar and outreach.
Maybe it's its own bullet, or if you reworked RAC seeks to be more data driven, it could be RAC seeks to be more community focused and data based on data. I don't know, but yeah, we have to have a bullet there because that we do a really bad job of.
Yep.
Somewhere.
Anne, did you have your hand up?
I did. I'm wondering if we can also talk about, after we do the review, what do we do with the review? Do we use it to set priorities and areas to work on for the coming year while communicating it to the town or the select board, or rather than just have, it's a little bit like data. If we do it, but only we have it and it just sits there. I'm not sure what I'm thinking we should do, but something along those lines.
I totally agree, and I think that the appropriate, it would be appropriate to sit down with the recreation director and review it, and that maybe it's a joint meeting with the recreation director and the next few higher, maybe John Kelly or Tom Daly, maybe it's several people in that chain of command. But I guess I would lean on that these are elements to be considered, and that we want this to have some teeth, to borrow from that first meeting in 2019, but that maybe we don't have to be the ones to figure out what the most appropriate teeth are. I'm comfortable sort of navigating that with the select board and the town administrator, I guess. Meth?
I just, in this kind of communication, what you're really talking about is reporting. And so I think developing some sort of reporting regularity, whether it's quarterly or seasonal or twice a year, that contains all the useful information that you get from the data analytics. And that report would come to the select board at whatever intervals you think are right. I mean, right now, the recreation report to the select board is it's almost like an afterthought to the DPW quarterly report, and you go through all the road work and you go through all the sewer work and you go through all that, and then at the end there's a little slide on recreation that is more like a, what did you do on your summer vacation kind of report. It doesn't educate you to anything really.
So math typically, is it quarterly?
Well, the DPW reports quarterly, and so all of the various departments that are in DPW is part of that report. So natural resources, for instance, is a big part of that report, but the recreation is in there. Maybe not every time, although it should be in every time.
Sharon?
So I think that what you are referring to, Matt, is exactly what we've experienced for the last 2 years. There's no transparency and there's no information forthcoming. And any information that we have needed, we've had to solicit, usually through Tom. Not, we'll ask Alan, but we don't get the information that we're looking for from him. And what you're seeing, it sounds like in that report, is exactly the same kind of thing, which is why I say that I get that feeling in the pit of my stomach when I look at his job description, because all of these things fall under his job description. And there should be a report with some meat to it. That is more than saying I have a softball program running and some kids tennis running right now.
Anne?
So I look at the charge as a way for us to accomplish our goal, our goals, our vision. And rather than have it directed at what we don't have, to be sure that we focus on what we know we need and should have. And for this particular one, the review, maybe the concept or element is that having conducted a review of the established goals, it will, we will set priorities for the department based on for the next year, and communicate our impressions and recommendations to the town through the select board, something to that effect. Taking it so that the purpose of the review is to see how the department and our participation in the department has approximated our goals, and where we, so a review can be, we did a great job in grant acquisition, but we see that effective communication and calendaring and so forth is still lacking, and we would like to set out these priorities for the coming year so that it has, it goes somewhere, presumably to people who care, notice, and support us.
Okay, I have that all down. Any other notes? If not, I will take these notes and incorporate them, and I'll send you all. When I send it to the select board, I'll send it to everyone else too. Okay. The other thing we'll discuss on the 9th is the new part-time position. I did this as activities envisioned to be undertaken by a community coordinator. I think having Rob Cunningham come at the beginning of the meeting is kind of a good test case for something that a community coordinator might be called in to help with. One of the other ideas that he mentioned to me when we spoke was having the trails in town having badges for each trail in town, and that kids in the elementary school could start in kindergarten, and each year they do a trail and get a different badge. So then you're bringing, which I thought was wonderful, and then you're bringing in rec, open space, the schools, and ideally, when I think about this new position, that's when you would call the community coordinator and say, who else should be part of this conversation? And who, if we want the schools involved, what's the best way to go about it? Someone who understands the school calendar and how field trips work and how you might navigate that. Maybe they would pull in Snow Library to have a literacy angle to it. But someone who, I have this idea, I don't know who the best partners are, or the best, a different kind of idea that needs a place to happen, that needs a location. What are the facilities in town that might work for this art class I want to run? So that has been something that has been in the back of my mind as I've been listing ideas. I would welcome your input and other ideas.
As you were talking, Tracy, I was starting to think, the Cape Cod mini grants that they give to teachers and things like that. I was thinking there's a perfect way to, so sourcing out other funding, grant opportunities, things like that might be something to include. I think there's a lot out there if somebody has the time to look for it.
Anything else? Anne?
That we've alluded to before, this person would perhaps attend the meetings, open space meeting when appropriate, and the library, Council on Aging, as well as when the police department holds a community policing topic, and that they, all of those things that we've tried to be part of.
Joan?
I think this person is sort of like the central, sort of like the wheel and the spoke. This person is in the middle, so that let's say the Clam Barbecue comes back, this person might be the one that connects all the dots together and says, we're going to do these 6 events. Judy's going to run this event for seniors. Someone's going to do intergenerational. The library's going to do this. So they sort of are the steering of those big collaborative opportunities. They would also keep up with what events are already planned. And I think the other thing we haven't talked about yet, because it's been closed, is there was a very robust adult education program that went on. And we need to re-engage with those people because they also offer recreation programs. This person would also look at duplications. Like if Judy has Zumba and Adult Ed has Zumba and we have, like, who's doing what, who's leveraging it, who's hiring. So that's the way I would look at it.
Yep. One thing is a point of concern for me in the current job description is that this person answers to the recreation director or is supervised by the recreation director. Again, I hope this doesn't become too much of a theme, but I can't think through where the best place for this person is, other than that it should not be, the supervision by the recreation director is not the best place. I think what we're talking about is someone doing something much broader, and the recreation director currently is really focused on programming, and that's not what we're looking for here. Anne?
It may help to change the title a little bit. I like the idea of coordinator of community life in Orleans.
And so does that change
where they belong?
Yeah. Because we can keep changing it until we get them someplace.
It would, since they're the hub, the that this position answers directly to the town administrator and the select board. I don't know, the town administrator.
This is Evan. I second that. Town administrator and select board.
I would throw another idea out there. I think you can have it report into Council on Aging, just because Judy has a staff. She knows what she's running. She runs programs. And instead of calling it Council on Aging, could it be called Community Life? I hate that it's called Council on Aging because I take classes there. It just makes me sad. So I would like it to be for younger people. But and the shame of it is, it's because of who's in the job. Otherwise, it would go to the director.
Well,
I think I agree with you partly, but I also think maybe not. I think part of the reason why it's under the director right now is because of the hours, not because of the actual defining of the position. Do you know? And I'm not trying to.
No.
why can't the
second
director,
guess that,
why can't the director report to this new person?
right? I mean,
Why can't the structure be different?
yeah, because I think if the hours were different, that would be the logical chain of command, that programming is part of community life, not the other way around. I don't know if you can, that's a lot on that person's plate in 19 and a half hours to do, work all this magic and manage a full-time employee, but I don't know. It certainly, I think, makes more sense in terms of how we're defining these two jobs.
I like that idea, Morgan, very much.
Me too.
We can try. Worst they can say is no. Other ideas? Okay. Sharon.
Just, I know that there was like a thought about them having access possibly to the revolving fund if they needed money to do any of these things. And if we put them on Council on the Aging, then that would be a very weird structure with no access to what funds there are, what's coming in.
I agree. Anne?
This may be a time to say it was kind of under the radar of everybody, but the kayak, rack, and education program included initiation of a Friends of Recreation 501c3. It isn't a Friends of Kayak and Waterways Education. It's a Friends of Recreation. It's right there in the application. And I'm just tossing that out as a resource for the community, what did we call it? Oh, the
Coordinator of Community Life in Orleans.
yes, the coordinator of community life as an additional resource, just as an aside, or
Okay.
maybe that the Friends of Recreation work directly. I don't know, because it's worth asking Judy how she works really well with her very active Friends group.
Okay.
Jeff, what do you think where this job can go?
I don't have a good answer for that. I think that town administrator is probably not a great. It might be a parking place for it, but in the long run, something better than that is needed. And none of those paid people should be reporting to the select board. I mean, that's just no one else does other than the town administrator. So. I don't know. I mean, there's a good case to be made for parking it into the planning department, because I think that's almost a natural activity that the planning department does. But whether George has any time at all to be to be watching over it is probably questionable. So
I mean,
I think that that's just one of those questions that should be out there on June 9th. What's the best way to deal with this?
and I think that the revolving fund is an important part of that. The intention of the revolving fund was to broaden things. So if this person is going to be doing the broadening, they should have access to the revolving fund.
More to the point is that if we are all in agreement that we have this sort of long range desire to really expand and grow the recreation or the community life program in town, then this person is just a piece that is in play today, but hopefully will grow into something different or larger if we make progress on where we want to go. So I think that I think it's good to have these conversations in the context of the longer term goals and make sure that we don't do things today that end up making it harder to get progress on the longer term goals.
Morgan?
I gotta go do soccer pickup. Bye.
Okay, bye. Okay, I'll move on unless there are other thoughts on that. Would anyone, before we move on completely from the select board meeting on the 9th, is anyone available on the 9th to attend the select board meeting with me? Sharon? Okay. And Ann? Okay, terrific. Okay, the next item is a CHO update from Carol and Ann.
Ann, do you want me to start and then you can chime in? The only update we have is
the update.
Yeah. Can you hear me okay? The only update we have is I did do a site walk with Jay Stradle. I hope I'm saying that right, who's the head of CHO, but not the executive director, head of the board, excuse me, I think chairman of the board. We looked at 139 Main, and it was just the two of us, and I passed on what I learned to Ann. I would say two things came out of it, that CHO does plan to go after CPC money next year. So that would be like the Thanksgiving deadline for next spring's town meeting. And in that, they plan to ask for money to help fund the plaza they're planning. That would be the flat spot between the old museum and now the Hurd Chapel that's been turned, so that they could have event space for fundraising purposes such as weddings and so on. So he made it very clear that that plaza was their first priority, and that he really didn't want to collaborate with us next year at all, because he doesn't want to threaten, their chances of getting that award for a high priority of theirs. So we both agreed it's good we're talking early and we're letting ideas bubble, but we really are talking early. It's probably a couple of years, a year and a half away before we would actually put anything in writing together. And secondly, just thoughts on the splash pad that was such a cool suggestion for the right location. I think it's not the right location because we've learned it's the leaching field. That flat gravelly spot is the leaching field for the town hall septic system. And so therefore there's lots of pipes, and I don't think you would be able to put more pipes in. Plus, I'm not sure the noise level from some things that Jay said would be something they'd be excited about, given the importance they're placing on this plaza and its ability to generate event revenue. But we should keep talking, and I did learn that the farmer's market has been talking to them. They concluded that was not going to be a site for them. And OIA, Orleans Improvement, has been talking to them, and specifically about being a piece of the pollinator pathway across town. And I don't know that there's more details than that. So it's good we're in discussion, but I don't think there's anything imminent and won't be for a while.
Anne?
Just as an aside, I guess, I have scarcely seen such enthusiasm from this enthusiastic committee when we talked about a splash pad.
Yeah.
And I would love to keep working on finding a place. I know it's been considered, and Tracy, you mentioned somebody had done a lot of work. And I volunteer to talk to that person and continue to bring it back so that we maybe can make it a reality, because as a concept, which I newly learned about, I think we should keep working on it.
Yeah, I think that's worth continuing to pursue. Okay. The next item on the agenda is town meeting on Saturday. The community center, or there's a community center feasibility study warrant article. It's number 24. It's 35,000 or 30, yeah. And so there was a Orleans Citizens Forum last week that put the community center feasibility study together with the Governor Prince acquisition warrant article and the downtown economic study warrant article, which is a nice place to be in terms of thinking about digging in and considering the future of Orleans and making sure that the community center, in whatever form it takes, is part of that conversation. So it's still a 3/4 yes vote required, and still an uphill battle. But if I remember correctly, the Harwich Community Center passed by 10 votes or something when they got it. So it's a battle worth having, and hopefully this time is a little, to charges that the last feasibility study was too expensive and not the right time. I would, say that this is less expensive and a really opportune time. Meth?
So I'm going to be presenting both this article and the Governor Prince. And the Governor Prince actually goes first.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been working on a little script, and I was, in part of that, try to tee you guys up as speakers on this. And I think it's, it might be, I'm going to see, it might be nice to have you up at the head rather than from the floor. And that might be something that we could arrange. But even if it's you up there, then having sort of prepared people scattered throughout the audience to speak would be good. The 3/4 vote is annoying, and there was not. I think the Finance Committee voted not to support by 1 vote, and they're the only ones that I think are officially on record as being opposed. But the amount of money should be, I think, acceptable to the voters. So, I'm sorry to be long-winded. I think, Tracy, have you talked with David Little yet?
I have not.
I think having a conversation with him and telling him what you hope to be able to do, and I'm happy, if he's okay with it, to have you up, and then when I get done, I can just hand it over to you to sort of talk about it. The only danger there is it's a community center, not a rec program that people are talking about. So how official it would be, you know, whether it would be good to have you be that official in the presentation or not, I don't know. But I think getting that whole point about the town survey and all the work that you've done leading into this, and the fact that actually the impetus for having this on the warrant article itself, on the warrant, is from you. So I think it's just good to talk with David and get a plan.
Okay.
You want to make sure that you get recognized early and not get caught up in whatever other silly stuff starts to happen.
I know that Kyle had said he was willing to speak and maybe focus his comments on a response to the whatever statement the FinCom makes. You know, in addition to whatever else you want to contribute. My thinking, I can speak, but it will be scripted. I'm not going to be thinking on my feet and trying to come up with something in the moment, because I won't get any sentences out. But
no, that thing you were at a week or so ago where you really were good. I thought the best part of your talk was when you got into the whole a place for the entire community to be able to be together and
okay.
You know, as a way for the community to be built. There's other than town meeting, what other place does the town come together? I mean, 4th of July and you know, our you know, celebrate our waters, but you know, there's a lot of sort of split groups in this town that don't ever really get together with each other.
Well, absolutely. You know, I was saying to Kyle, we kind of need the community center now in order to connect with all the people who we need to vote to support it.
Right.
You know, like you know, you kind of know who you know, depending on where you are and what your day looks like. I could get something done at the elementary school, I bet, but beyond that, my scope is a little more limited. So yes, I agree wholeheartedly. Carol.
Yeah, I saw your presentation the other night on the Citizens Forum, and you were terrific, Tracy. So I would just take your words right out of that and repeat the same sorts of things you said. The other part that I found really helpful was when you said, families like mine wouldn't have to drive to Brewster to do this and to here to do that and to this other place to do this if we had these things in town. Okay. As well as the running into people that are my age, not my age, not in my circumstances, and seeing them over and over because we're there exercising together or taking an art class together or whatever. Okay. Emphasizing the intergenerational and the connectedness of the community. I think it'd be great. I did ask a fellow who had responded to you, Tracy, and to Kyle by email if he would speak. And I asked him, and I have not heard his answer yet. So it's possible we'll have a fellow that didn't speak at any of the earlier meetings, but anyway, I'm still working on it.
Okay. Joan.
There was someone on the finance committee. I sent you his name. He did a very nice job talking about the need for a community center at a different meeting I was in. And I don't know whether or not you can have a pro person from the finance committee speak, Matt.
Well, that person voted against the feasibility study. So I'm not quite, so I'm wary of asking him to speak. I think the person on the finance committee who voted in favor is planning on speaking, but it's different from the person who spoke at the forum that you were at. Well, you know, it's a tangled web in town politics.
But that's actually technically a requirement for for a committee like the finance committee that has a split vote to have someone speak on both groups. So I would expect someone to speak during the finance committee's moment of explaining their vote.
Okay.
Is there anyone else from this committee who would like to speak on Saturday? I know I'm poking at a few of you this week. Maybe people are still thinking. All right. I will reach out to David Little. I think, you know, there were people who spoke in October really persuasively, and I would assume most of them will get up and speak again. The reasons for doing this haven't changed, but I think the conditions under which we can do it have improved. So hopefully they've improved, you know, 25% or whatever we need to get to that 3/4.
I have a question. Is
Morgan
Judy?
left, but you know, if she could get Josh to
Yeah,
to speak, he I think carries some weight at the meeting.
yes, I agree.
Do
Joan?
we know if Judy Wilson lives in Orleans, or the woman, or someone that runs the Friends of Council on Aging? Because this community center is intergenerational, and I think if we had someone from Friends of Council on Aging, it would be really strong.
So Joan, I've reached out to a COA board member who had expressed interest in assisting. I haven't heard back from this person yet, but I am continuing to try to reach out to those people I met with about a year or so ago.
Oh,
To
great.
try to get some of that perspective.
Yeah, that would be great.
Absolutely. Carol?
The finance committee is going on simultaneously with our committee, and I happen to hear it on Zoom in a different room of my house. So I just checked, and my husband, Tim, will be speaking in favor of the community center on behalf of the finance committee.
Great.
Terrific. Mhm. Okay. All right. Well, you know, get your friends to town meeting and voting the way we need them to vote on this. You know, I think the conversation I think has grown so much even since the October vote. You know, that Orleans Citizens Forum in January was a really wonderful opportunity to get more people involved and bring a few other people to the table. And I don't see the conversation not continuing to grow, you know, whatever happens on Saturday. I think it's the momentum is building. Meth?
I just want to say, because this pertains to the Governor Prince as well, that the article is just really to fund a study to find out what it is that the town wants in the way of a community center. And so letting the conversation, you know, get tied into the Governor Prince or anything like that, I think is counterproductive. I think trying to keep people focused on just you know, what do we mean by a community center? Because if you look around us, every town has figured it out differently. And we can't even know what size property or what lot, what site we would need or what size building without doing doing the due diligence. And that's really the question. Not being for or against community centers in general, just, you know, what is it that we want or would want?
Right. Okay. Future agenda items.
I'm going to say good night, by the way.
Okay. Good night, Meth. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Meth.
Anne?
I'm hopeful that our community preservation grants will be accomplished. And what I would like to do in the next meeting is just formulate a thank you to our collaborators and be very public about this accomplishment and our gratitude to everybody who helped.
Good idea. Joan?
Two things. One, we should talk about going forward with the CPA projects and who's, like Steve O'Grady, we're all involved with him, who's contacting conservation. We don't want to overload everyone, so maybe a sort of communication point so we can get these done. You guys got basketball courts to start engineering with Tom, so I think we want to talk about that in total. And then are we going to be live? Because as of July 15th, we can have live town meetings.
Yeah, in person.
in person?
Yes, I already reached out to babysitters for the 20th because I'm going to need them for the first time in 14 or 15 months. Yes.
So what's the date of the next meeting?
I said the 20th, but that's today, so I should check that. It's
The 17th, right? The third?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the 17th.
And we don't
Um,
have to be recorded, right? You never were
Hey.
always recorded?
It said, the letter that I saw said that meetings would still be recorded. I guess you maybe, because there will still be limits on how many. I don't know exactly why, but maybe so that people from home are still able to view and participate. As I've said, I rewatch our meetings in order to remember what I said and what I said I would do. So I'm grateful for a little more recording. I don't know how long that will last, but yes, as far as I know, we will be in person on the 17th.
Great. Great.
Yeah. I know it'll be nice to see everyone in 3D.
Yeah.
Okay, so I will look for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, and second.
Second the motion.
All right, all in favor? Aye. All right,
Aye.
thanks very much,
Aye.
everyone.
Thank
This was a
Yeah.
productive meeting, and I appreciate everyone's input.